Well, anglers, welcome back into the Teaching Fishing COVID studio. We are here talking about our 8 steps breakdown, and today we're on step number 5, which is lure size. And step number 5 is really where we start talking about getting into your tackle box and actually bringing a lure out to put into the water. Everything we've done before that has kind of depended on some other things of being in the right place. So let's take just a second. Let's go back and review what the 8 steps actually are. Remember, the 8 steps is a framework, a guide for you to use for every decision you make fishing and every piece of information you get when you're fishing of where to actually put it and kind of make important decisions with the details that you have. We break the 8 steps down into 2 pieces, what we call above the line, or what we call the where, be in the right location, be in the right depth of water, know how deep your fish are, and get your lures to the right depth. That's kind of the where. And then below the line is what we call the what you actually need to put in the water. And we start that with lure speed. And as we pick a lure speed, we can start to eliminate some lures. And now we're actually step number 5, which is lure size. Going to talk about what lure we actually need to pull out of our box to put in the water to help us catch more fish. So that's where we are today. Remember, these 8 steps are listed in order of importance. Step number 5 is only important if step 1 through 4 are right. So we have to think of this in order of importance. So let's go on with step number 5, lure size, and break it down a little bit further. One of the questions I get all the time when we're talking about lures is how big is too big, especially for walleyes. Remember, walleyes are top-end predators with a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. If you don't think walleyes are top-end predators, this year, the first walleye you catch, do me a favor, stick your thumb in his mouth, close his mouth, and pull your thumb out and look at your thumb. That is the mouth of a top-end predator. What do walleye eat? Anything they want. Whatever's around, whatever they can catch, they will eat it. Remember, this is always something that catches a lot of people by surprise when we do this seminar. A walleye's preferred forage size is 1/4 to 1/3 their body length. Where I fish in the upper Great Lakes, a 10-pound walleye is 30 inches long. So we're looking, if you want to attract a big fish, his preferred forage is 7.5 to 10 inches long. You're not going to scare away a walleye with a 4-inch bait. It's not going to happen. They eat whatever they want. I'm going to show you some pictures later of some big bait. Sometimes we are fishing too small, and it's actually allowing us to only catch small fish. We're going to talk about that a little bit later today. All right, a couple little guidelines. Again, these are just kind of rules, kind of guidelines to think about. But there are some conditions when your lure should be a little bit on the smaller side. Anytime fish are close to bottom, they're usually inactive. Post-frontal conditions, again, we're dealing with inactive fish. Really, really clean water, we want to downsize our lures. Pressured fish that have seen a lot of lures and maybe are a little leery. And then late spring or early summer. We'll talk about the time frame a little bit later, but that's important to understand. In late spring and early summer, we definitely want to be thinking about fishing smaller size lures. When should our lures be big? A couple of things that we should think about. Cold water. Anytime the water is cold, our lures should be big. That may be just the opposite of what some of you think. We're going to cover that a little bit later. Stable weather. As the weather gets better, fish are more on the feed. They're more apt to hit bigger baits. Anytime you're dealing with suspended or open water fish that need to see a lure from a long way away, big baits help that process of being able to see the lure easier. Stained or dirty water for the same reason. Fish can see that bigger bait better. Fish that are in cover, and again, fish that are in heavy cover, heavy weeds, or heavy wood, it's important that we give them a big bait so they can see it through that cover. And then lastly, anytime we're dealing with nighttime or low light conditions, we want a bigger bait so we have a bigger profile. The fish can miss a little bit and still get hooks in their mouth. So that's just some basic guidelines on small lures and big lures to get us started on this breakdown of step number 5, lure size. Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back to kind of get into the 3 factors that determine lure size every time you're on the water. Warrior Lures, custom designed and painted spoons, blades, and crankbaits for any species of fish. Check out the complete line of Warrior products, including the new Warrior XL Flutter Spoon, online or at your local tackle retailer. Proudly made in Michigan. TraxTech Fishing Systems, manufacturer of high-quality mounting track, rod holders, electronics mounts, downriggers, and fishing accessories. Any angler, any species, any boat. TraxTech Fishing Systems, proudly made in Michigan. Rytec Marine, makers of custom-designed transducer mounts and gimbal brackets. Great sonar performance starts with a quality transducer mount and Rytec has a mounting option for any brand on any boat. Rytec Marine, making life a little easier on the water. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Don't get caught with a loss to find out you have the wrong insurance for your boat and fishing gear. Contact Bob Llewellyn today for a free checkup of your current coverage. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Anglers insuring anglers. Okay, so now we're ready to start picking some baits and actually get them in the water. So what are some factors we need to think about as we determine what lure size is going to be best every day? Well, the first factor you need to think about is forage. And if you've been with us for step 3 and step 4, I told you that you're going to see these next pictures all the way through until we finish with step 8. And these pictures are very, very important because you need to know what kind of forage lives in your body of water that you're fishing. And again, it doesn't matter if you're fishing for bluegills or crappies or northern pike or muskie or walleye or largemouth bass or smallmouth bass, salmon, steelhead, lake trout. If you're out saltwater fishing, it doesn't matter. You have to know the forage that lives in your lake. We'll talk about how to know that a little bit later. But what forage lives in your lake and how big it is at certain times of the year. That's very, very important so we can get an idea of what we should be using. So once we know what kind of forage lives in our lake, we can go on the lake and we can actually use our sonar to give us some good information. So our sonar is going to give us 3 different types of information. Number 1, it's going to tell us how the game fish are related to the bait fish. That gives us a good idea of what kind of bait fish there actually are. Number 2, we're going to see where the bait fish are located in the water column. And number 3, we can see how the bait fish are spread out or grouped tightly together. Those 3 things give us a good idea of what kind of bait fish we have on our screen and what kind of bait fish the fish are actually feeding on. So here we've got a great example of a school of shad way up high in the water column feeding on plankton. This was a hot, flat, calm early fall day, a lot of sun. These fish are feeding on plankton. The shad were coming all to the top. The walleyes moved in and got them really scared and got them really tight. This was a shad bite. I'm going to show you a picture of some of the fish we caught that day with their stomachs cut open here in just a little bit later. But that is a school of shad. Conversely, here I've got smaller bait in the middle of the water column. Late spring, early summer, this is actually a school of shiners. So I know I've got a different style of bait fish, so I need a different size lure, because even big shiners don't get as big as medium-sized shad do. So part of my process of determining what lure size to use is knowing how big the bait fish I'm dealing with in the water should be. We'll talk about how big to go in just a second. Then lastly, I've got game fish that are on the bottom, which tells me they're either inactive or they may be feeding on bottom-dwelling bait fish, gobies, perch, chubs, suckers, bait fish that live on the bottom. So again, usually bait that lives on the bottom is usually not very big. So I've got an idea of what's going on. So by using the sonar to figure out where the game fish and the bait fish are and how the 2 are related together in the water column gives me an idea of what kind of bait fish I have in my lake and how big my initial lure size should be. Now, as I'm fishing though, I start to determine how big I can get away with. Now, I like to fish. If you saw part 4 breakdown, we talked about speed. You know I like to fish as fast as I can fish. I also like to fish as big as I can fish most days. So as I put baits back after catching fish, I will begin to slowly increase the size of the lures I have in the water. So let's say I'm catching fish on 3-inch baits. 3-inch bait, I caught 1. 3-inch bait, I caught 2. 3-inch bait, I caught 3. I'm going to put some 4- and 5-inch baits in my spread. At some point, lures will be too big to continue getting bites. They just won't look right. Now we can zero in on a specific bait size and start trying different shapes, speeds, colors to find the best pattern for the day. So once we know that the fish are feeding on, I'm catching a bunch on 3-inch, I put some 4- and 5-inch baits in the water, maybe a 2-inch bait, and I get bit on the 3s and the 4s. I can now take the 5s out, eliminate the 2s. Now I can go in my box and I can look for long, skinny minnow shapes. I can look for shad shapes that are 3 inches and 4 inches long, put different shapes. We're going to talk about that next month is we're going to break down shape. Huge part of this puzzle. And now I've got some options for the fish to actually choose from. So I like to put baits in the water a little bit bigger than I'm catching fish on to see where the fish say, no, you can't go that big. That's an important part of getting a good pattern together. Remember, when we talk about how big can you go, remember that game fish are expecting the bait fish they're feeding on to look a certain way, especially when they're active, aggressive, and feeding. Okay, you're not going to catch fish on a 2-inch bait when they're eating 6-inch fish. You're not going to catch fish on a 6-inch bait when they're feeding on 2-inch bait. It's not going to happen. You want the size of your bait to match what they're feeding very, very closely. But match the size of the bait to what the fish are feeding on, or go a little bit bigger. The more aggressive fish are, the higher they are in the water column. The closer they are, the tighter the bait fish are balled, the more active those game fish are, the little bit bigger you can go and get away with it. All right? Don't be afraid to try baits that are too big, especially when you're faced with negative game fish. Just like speed, high speed, I think that big lures are more attractive to negative fish than small lures are. Again, if I'm sitting on the bottom, I'm not really hungry, I really don't want to move, but here comes a big bait, I may go up and eat it knowing that if I eat that, I don't have to eat for another day. I can stay inactive. I may do that more than chase a small little morsel or niblet put right in my face very, very slowly. So I like big baits to trigger. My first try to trigger inactive fish, if I have to, is big bait. Something to file away when you're out there. High speeds, big baits to trigger negative fish, not necessarily slow speeds and small baits. Something to file away and try when you're on the water. All right, that's a little breakdown of some basics about forage and kind of how forage relates to the size of the bait that you pick. Let's take a real quick break right here, and we'll be back to talk about factor number 2 in determining the lure size you should use every time you're on the water. Warrior Lures, custom designed and painted spoons, blades, and crankbaits for any species of fish. Check out the complete line of Warrior products, including the new Warrior XL Flutter Spoon, online or at your local tackle retailer. Proudly made in Michigan. TraxTech Fishing Systems, manufacturer of high-quality mounting track, rod holders, electronics mounts, downriggers, and fishing accessories. Any angler, any species, any boat. TraxTech Fishing Systems, proudly made in Michigan. Rytec Marine, makers of custom-designed transducer mounts and gimbal brackets. Great sonar performance starts with a quality transducer mount, and Rytec has a mounting option for any brand on any boat. Rytec Marine, making life a little easier on the water. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Don't get caught with a loss to find out you have the wrong insurance for your boat and fishing gear. Contact Bob Llewellyn today for a free checkup of your current coverage. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Anglers insuring anglers. Fishhawk Electronics, providing lure speed and water temperature at any depth. Featuring hardwired models X4 and X4D and the new portable X2, anglers can have the Fishhawk advantage anywhere they fish. Trolling without a fishhawk is simply called boating. Max Lure, the original since 1969. Catch more fish with the Wedding Ring Spinner, Smile Blade, Double D Dodger, Flashlight Attractor, and more. Max Lures, a legacy of innovation for 50 years. Macklin Heating and Cooling, experts in the installation, maintenance, and service of home comfort systems. Family owned and operated in mid-Michigan for 50 years, Macklin Heating and Cooling, where your comfort matters to us.
ProCure Bait Sense, manufacturer of high-quality bait scents, cures, and dyes. Made with whole fresh bait, ProCure scents perfectly mimic what fish eat every day. ProCure, helping anglers worldwide catch more big fish.
Okay, so now we know what kind of forage lives in our lake. We're starting to make some bait size decisions based on the forage that's available. So let's go on to our next factor, time of year. What time of year is it? And that's very, very important. Let's go back though, and let's kind of talk about this real quick. Game fish are expecting bait fish to look a certain way, especially when they are feeding. Match the size of the bait to what the fish are feeding on, or go a little bit bigger. Don't be afraid to try baits that are too big, especially when faced with negative game fish. We just covered that in the last section, but that's important as we go forward here. So, time of the year, forage that we have in the lake, and time of the year are huge. Don't be afraid to fish big baits. I'm going to give you some guidelines on time of the year in just a second. Remember I showed you those walleyes that were feeding on that school of shad? This is one of those. So this is actually a 26-inch walleye, and he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 5 to 6 inch shad in his belly. This is only a 26, 27 inch walleye. And he's full. We caught that fish on a super shad wrap, a shad wrap that's almost 7 inches long. Because we knew, based on what we were seeing, that those fish were feeding on shad. We knew that time of year, shad were big. So don't be afraid to fish big when the time of year says bait should be big. Conversely, sometimes small is best. There are times of year that small bait is best. So here you've got a northern pike that's gorged on little 1.5, 2-inch young of the year shiners. So a big difference between 1.5, 2-inch shiners and 5 to 7-inch shad. A lot of that is based on time of the year. So don't just count on what kind of forage is in your body of water. Understand the time of year and how big the forage is that time of the year. So remember, we're trying to closely duplicate what the fish are feeding on, what they're eating with our lures. But there are a few guidelines to follow. So follow these guidelines. Number 1, bait fish are big in cold water. In early spring, okay, and this, I want to stop right here. This goes against what a lot of people think. A lot of anglers think the colder the water, the slower I have to go and the smaller my bait has to be. Absolutely false. You're thinking backwards, especially about bait size. The colder the water, the bigger your bait should be. Bait fish are big in cold water. In early spring, any bait that has survived the winter is now full size. There is no 1.5-inch bait left in late March, early April, ice out here where I fish. In the fall, any bait that's left, any bait the fish are feeding on in the fall, because most bait fish don't live more than a year, 12 to 18 months. So their life cycle is very, very quick. So they grow fast. In the fall, any bait that's left has reached full mature size. Okay, so cold water, big baits. Most bait fish hatch in late spring, early summer, and this is when you should start thinking about using smaller baits. Kind of backwards, right? So actually, the colder the water, the bigger the bait should be. The warmer the water, the smaller the bait should be. I'm going to make this simple. Here are my rules on bait size. These are Lance's rules of bait size based on time of the year. Again, remember, forage is important. So a big shiner is not as big as a medium-sized shad. So that's still important. What kind of bait fish am I like? What kind of forage are the fish feeding on? And then relative size based on the forage. So my rule of thumb is this. Big baits in early spring. Small baits from Mother's Day until Father's Day. That's kind of standard for me. I'll go down to 2, 3-inch baits Mother's Day to Father's Day because that's when where I live, Upper Great Lakes, that's when most of our bait fish spawn. That's when the shiners spawn. That's when the shad hatch. That's when most bait fish, the perch are starting to hatch. That's when most bait fish are hatching and they get to that 1.5, 2-inch size where they're actually viable to eat is Mother's Day to Father's Day. So I'll fish small lures Mother's Day to Father's Day. After Father's Day until about mid-August, I'll mix. I'll run big baits and small baits. I may have a spread out that has lures that are 2 inches to 7 inches to start the day. The fish will tell you, I promise you, every day the fish will say, no, I want big baits today. No, I want small baits. And understand that may change if you move 2 miles down the lake. You may catch them on small baits here, move 2 miles down the lake and find another pot of fish. They may want big baits because of what they're feeding on. So you really have to be flexible in that Father's Day through mid-August. Once we get to mid-August, though, the heat of the summer through the end of summer into early fall, I fish big baits exclusively. 3.5, 4, 5, 6, 7-inch baits almost all the time in that mid-August through early fall. And once we get to turnover, for me, that super secret, fantastic temperature in late fall is 52 degrees. Once we get to 52, it's all big baits. Nothing in the water less than 4.5, 5 inches long. Lots of 4.5-inch baits, lots of 5-inch baits, lots of 6-inch baits, baits up to even sometimes 7 or 8 inches long, sometimes some small musky baits if I'm in the right situation in fall and the fish are feeding on ciscos, whitefish, big shad. I may actually go to small musky crankbaits that are 8.5, 9 inches long in the late fall time. Okay? So that's a pretty good guideline. Big baits early spring, small baits Mother's Day to Father's Day, mix and match Father's Day to mid-August, let the fish tell you, mid-August through the fall, through early fall, big baits, and then once you get past about 52 degrees and colder in the fall, big baits, bigger baits, biggest baits. Don't be afraid to go big. Okay? Let's take one last break and we'll come back with factor number 3 to get you dialed in on the right lure size every time you go fishing. Fishhawk Electronics, providing lure speed and water temperature at any depth. Featuring hardwired models X4 and X4D and the new portable X2, anglers can have the Fishhawk advantage anywhere they fish. Trolling without a Fishhawk is simply called boating. Max Lure, the original since 1969. Catch more fish with the Wedding Ring Spinner, Smile Blade, Double D Dodger, Flashlight Attractor, and more. Max Lures, a legacy of innovation for 50 years. Macklin Heating and Cooling, experts in the installation, maintenance, and service of home comfort systems. Family owned and operated in mid-Michigan for 50 years, Macklin Heating and Cooling, where your comfort matters to us.
Procure Bait Sense, manufacturer of high-quality bait scents, cures, and dyes. Made with whole fresh bait, Procure scents perfectly mimic what fish eat every day. Procure, helping anglers worldwide catch more big fish.
Okay, let's get ready to wrap this up. We are on our third and final factor of picking the right lure size every time you're on the water. And now we're going to talk about some advanced ideas about lure size. We talked about forage and time of year. Those are kind of very, very specific. Let's just talk about some advanced ideas on lure size to give you some of the things that I think about and some of the things that I use to get me dialed into the right lure size every time I'm on the water. Number one, I would tell you, if you get nothing out of this seminar, don't be afraid to fish big. Big baits will often trigger bites from inactive or negative fish, especially in cold water. I believe that's very true. It's always a good idea to have at least one bait in the water that is too big. Even in the summertime, if you catch them on 3-inch baits, don't be afraid to have a 5 or 6-inch bait somewhere in your spread. It can make a big difference some days, and some days it's the trigger that catches a little bigger fish than those smaller lures do. So don't be afraid in your regular spread to try a little bit bigger baits. You might be surprised what you actually catch. And here's a great example of this. I saved this picture for last, one of my favorite pictures. This is actually a white bass that's about 11 inches long. And that came out of that walleye right there that was 25.5 inches long. So an 11-inch bait fish out of a 25-inch fish, that's almost 50%. Right, of that fish's size, and that fish still hit a big crankbait. That fish actually hit a 800 series reef runner, which is 4.5 inches long. So that 26-inch fish had an 11-inch bait fish in his belly and still attacked a 4.5-inch lure. These fish, especially in cold water, guys, don't be afraid to fish big. If the conditions, even in the summertime, tell you fish are feeding on big bait, fish big baits. One of the things we do as walleye fishermen, we don't fish shallow enough, we don't fish fast enough, and we don't fish big enough baits. We have this idea that walleyes are sissy fish, and we have to go backwards really slow with light lines, small lures, and small hooks, and we got to be on the bottom, whether it's rocky, and they don't like the sun. All those are false. Okay, there's proof right there. I can't prove it anymore. If you've got big bait fish in your body of water, I guarantee you walleyes are eating that big bait. Go fish for them. What's in my lake? How do I find out what's in my lake? Bait fish and prey species in any body of water can usually be found through your state DNR or Fisheries Division website. That's the first place to look. Go on there, look up and ask for the most recent netting surveys for details on the bait fish and other prey available. Most lakes, if they've done a netting survey, they actually do a status of the lake report. And in there, you want to read that first part, the abstract, the first part of it, because there are paragraphs that will tell you, since our last netting, we've seen the gizzard shad population go down. Or since our last netting, we've seen the prevalence of round gobies get bigger. We've seen the shiner hatch explode. We've had 4 good years of shiner hatch. Whatever the case may be, you're going to find that in the abstract, the first part of that report. It's going to tell you what kind of bait fish were in there, what they found, and how that bait fish is different, less or more, than the last time they did the survey. That's important information to have. Not only does it tell you what bait fish are in your body of water, it also helps you determine kind of, is there new bait fish, and is there a situation where some of the bait fish I used to key on are actually getting less prevalent and I need to change the way I think. Check out your DNR website or your DNR fish or your Fisheries Division so you can actually get that information. Build a good tackle selection. This is something I tell guys all the time. When you're shopping for tackle, buy wide before you buy deep. Everybody wants to have 1 or 2 lures they really like in 50 magical super secret colors. That's not a good idea. You're better off to have a wide tackle selection, have 10, 15, 20 different lures in only 4 or 5 base colors than you are to have 1 lure in all these fancy colors. We're going to talk about color in a couple months. I'm not a big color guy, but we'll talk about that when it's time. If you're a serious fisherman, I don't care if it's walleye, I don't care if it's pike, I don't care if it's bass, You should have crankbaits in your box from 2 inches up to, let's say, 8, 9, maybe even 10 inches if you fish where walleyes get big and there's lots of big bait. Or you fish for northern pike that feed on ciscos and whitefish. You should have crankbaits in your box that are 2 to 10 inches long. That's a good place to start. You're going to use those baits. If you really follow along with what's going on, you're going to use all those baits over the course of the year. And if you travel and fish lots of different bodies of water, you're going to use those baits throughout the course of the year. If you're a crawler harness fisherman and you fish for walleye with spinner blades size 2 to size 8. I've seen a size 5 blade catch a bunch of fish and a size 6 catch nothing. I've watched it happen. Have a good selection of blades. Have small blades, have big blades. We'll talk about shape next month when we'll talk about the different types of spinner blades to have, but have the right size. If you like to jig for walleye, either casting baits into the weeds or the rocks or shallow parts of the river, or you like to vertical jig and use plastics, make sure you've got a good plastic selection. Short little 2-inch baits all the way up to big 8-inch baits. That's very important. There will be days that the fish are on big baits in a river. Maybe you're vertical jigging in a river time in late spring or early fall, and you've got fish that are feeding on ciscos or whitefish that are running up that river, or they're chasing suckers in early spring, and those suckers are 6, 7, 8 inches long. You're not going to catch them with a 3-inch twister tail. Put an 8-inch body on there. So have plastics that range from size 2 to 8 inches. You're going to be good. And if you are going to go live bait fishing, you're going to buy minnows, you're going to buy leeches, you're going to buy crawlers, make sure that you have different sizes. If you're a leech guy, if you like to fish leeches, make sure you've got jumbo leeches, large leeches, and maybe medium leeches. That's a huge part of leech fishing we've talked about in our weed walleye seminars. If you've got minnows, don't just buy 3-inch emerald shiners. Make sure you've got some bigger minnows. Make sure you've got some pike minnows. There are days that 6-inch chub catches more walleyes than that 3-inch walleye minnow does. Have different varied sizes of bait in your container so you can make those changes and let the fish tell you what baits they want. Okay? All right, one of the questions I get all the time are, what are some big crankbaits? So obviously we do a lot of walleye fishing, a lot of walleye trolling. What are some big crankbaits that I fish? And here, this is kind of my favorite. There are a few more. There's actually quite a long list, but these are my favorites. These are ones that I have fished, I have in my box on a pretty regular basis, and I know that they work. The Rapala Super Shad Rap, one of my favorites. You can use lead core to get it deeper. You can use inline weights to get it deeper. You can use offshore big tadpoles to get it down to 30, 35 feet of water. It's a shallow running bait out of the box, but you can run it on some kind of weighting device and get it way down. So the Rapala Super Shad Rap, you've got to have in your box. It's just something you have to have in your box. It's a small musky bait for the time that muskie or pike are feeding on small baits. It's a small of the spectrum for them. It's at the big end of the spectrum for walleyes. It's a great bait to have, very versatile bait. Rapala Floating Magnum, 7 3/4 inches long. One of my favorite baits. Again, you can get it down deep with any weighting device. You can cast it if you want to cast it. Again, it's a small end of musky pike baits, but at the big end of walleye or largemouth bass, smallmouth bass baits. So it's a perfect in-between bait to have in your boat all the time. Same thing with the Reef Runner 900. The Reef Runner Action in a bait that's about 7 inches long. Great bait. I wouldn't think of going walleye trolling spring and fall specifically without it. Rapala F18s. I hope everybody has some F18s in their box. Just a great bait. If you like fatter crankbaits, we're going to talk about shape next month. The Strike King 10XD, one of my favorites. It's big bait. It's a long bait. It imitates shad and it gets fairly deep fairly quick. Rapala X-Rap Magnums. This is more of a saltwater bait. You may have to change the hooks on it and put more lighter freshwater hook style hooks on it. But that X-Rap Magnum is about, I think, 7 5/8 of an inch long. It's almost 8 inches long. Just an awesome jerk bait for shallow trolling, casting, or again, getting deep with other methods of weighting. The Bomber Long Shot, again, another long skinny bait that gets deep. And then the Bomber Magnum Long A, a little bit longer than the traditional Long A. So those are some crankbaits. If you're looking for big, so Lance, what do I buy for 7, 8, 9 inch crankbaits? That's a pretty good selection. There's a couple different shapes in there. We'll talk about, again, shape. We'll cover next month. But size for right now, that will get you covered. Those are some lures you have to have in your box if you're going to be doing any kind of casting or trolling for any kind of fish. Those are crankbaits at the big end that work really, really well. How can I wrap up lure size? I'll make it simple. If you're going to miss big. If you don't know if it's 3 or 4 inches, go with 4 and 5. If you think it might be 4, go 4 and 5. If you think it might be 5, go 5 and 6, maybe even 7. If you're going to miss big. You've got a better chance of getting fish to hit a lure that's too big than a lure that's too small, especially if the fish are active and aggressive. So if you're going to miss on the big side. All right, we just wrapped up number 5, step number 5, lure size. We are on our 8 steps, and remember, our 8 steps are listed in order of importance. So pay attention, be in the right location first, be in the right depth of water, know where the fish are, get your lure to the right depth, get your lure speed right, lure size, and then the next couple months we'll cover lure shape, lure action, and lure color. Hopefully that helps you learn those 8 steps, understand them. All right, if you're looking for more information, head over to our website, teachinfishing.com. When you go to teachinfishing.com, you will see that there is a TV screen there. One of the channels on our TV, as you go to the bottom, there'll be a channel selection, is the Foundation channel. And all of those seminars can be found on the Foundation channel. This seminar will be on one of those channels. And you can always find our other 8-step breakdowns. If you scroll down a little further down the screen, there'll be a little icon that says 8 steps. You can click on that 8 steps icon, and our breakdowns of step 1 through 4 are there. They're kind of archived. You can go back and watch them. If you've missed 1 through 4, you can watch them. But check out our Teachin' Fishin' homepage. Lots of stuff going on. Click on the Resource Center. We have a library, lots of articles, lots of other information that's there too. But check out the TV station and see what's going on. If you want some more hardcore information, be sure you scroll down the bottom of the page and check out our subscription series. There's some things there you're going to get that the normal public isn't going to get if you're a subscription member. Check that out. Some great value there for some great exclusive seminars, Q&A sessions, classes, on the water and off the water classes, chances to be the first to sign up for our events. Check that out while you're on the website. Questions. It's 2020. The end of every month we do a live Q&A, and this month we will be focusing on, one of the things we're focusing on will be this 8-step breakdown of lure size. So if you got some questions, hang on to them. We'll be live on the Teachin' Fishin' Facebook page June 30th, which is the last Tuesday of June. We'll be live on June 30th at 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. answering your questions. So if you have some questions, hang on to them. We can answer them for you live on our Facebook Q&A. And if you need to get a hold of us, teachinfishing.com is our website. Facebook.com/teachinfishing is our Facebook page. And then if you need to send us, if you have a question or you need some more information about what's going on or you just want to get a hold of us, teachinfishing@gmail.com is our email address. We're always here to answer any question you may have, any comment. Please get a hold of us. Okay? All right, that wraps up step 5, lure size. Lots to unpack there. So go back and review this a couple times. Think about your lure size, folks. When you're on the water, lure size is the first thing we think about when we get into our box. If you look at our 8 steps, after getting the speed right, the first thing when we go into our box to pull a lure is we have to get the right size. It's a very, very important part of the puzzle. That's why it's up towards the top. All right, I'm Captain Lance Valentine. Thank you for all your support over the years. Thank you for watching this program. And again, if there's anything we can do here at Teachin' Fishin', please let us know. Look for us on the water. Come by and say hi if you see us, and have a great fishing season.